You're listening to episode 253 of the Super League pod. There's limited match action this week, but it doesn't mean we don't have a packed show for you. We catch up on your views on the advancement of overseas expansion as we ask whether Ottawa will play their cards right. There's more than hands getting a thorough wash this week in West Hull as we discuss Radford's departure from FC. Then from Sarge's hits, Alfort's finish and Rover's escape, we have all the stats, highlights and scores covered. Plus, Britwatch is back from down under. Then we make a different kind of prediction this week. When will we see games again? If it's as accurate as our last week's game tipping, it may be some time. So soap, rinse, repeat, then get yourself strapped in, because it's SLP time. Hello listeners, this is episode 253 of the Super League pod. You have myself, Mark, and we have, of course it's Challenge Cup round just been. We've got Alan on. I don't know if you went to any Challenge Cup games, Alan, but you are the Challenge Cup man nowadays.
Yes, that appears to be my official title, amongst other things. But no, I didn't. I managed to catch some of the streamed stuff, but no, I was... Yes, I was otherwise occupied this weekend.
Self-isolated.
We said we wouldn't talk about it.
Oh yeah, we're not going to talk about it till later on. Instead, do you want to talk about who our sponsor is for this episode? Because of course we want to keep supporting small businesses where we can.
Absolutely, yes. So this episode is sponsored by Rob's Toy Shop. Find a wide range of toys, gifts, Rugby League birthday cards and more at Rob's Toy Shop on eBay. Visit stores.ebay.co.uk/Rob's Toy Shop, and on any orders over £5 you can earn 5% cash back, and also 1% of your order value will go into the SLP coffers if you put SLP discount at checkout.
Excellent stuff. Plenty of toys for children and pets. So you've got an option there, to keep your people entertained if you've got them around the house a little bit more. On the show, with the Easter holidays coming up, Alan, they'll be around the house a bit more. Yeah,
that's right.
On the show this week, we're going to cover your listener feedback on Ottawa, because we didn't really get a chance to share that last week with the news breaking on the Monday. Then we'll do something a bit different this week. One of this week's games led to one of this week's leading news stories, didn't it? So we're kind of going to do a bit of a merge with match reviews and news kind of colliding together to start the news section off. What we'll call the time to wash your bed sheets section of the show. And why not try something different in these unprecedented of times that we keep being told about? Then we're going to go through the rest of the news, of course. We'll talk about the games. We've got some Super League games, so we'll have 2 more Super League games to cover other than the newsworthy one. And we've got the Challenge Cup. We've got start of the NRL. So we've got plenty of games to talk about, thankfully, unlike podcasts covering other sports this week. Then we're going to give you all the other results from around the world of Rugby League, and then we'll see what we're going to do for our looking forward to predictions kind of section. That'll be maybe a little bit different this week too. But first of all, we're going to start with the listener feedback about the Ottawa franchise's acceptance into League One starting from 2021. Of course, last week we didn't get the chance to air your views, so we've got a few here to discuss. And then Alan, of course, will get your view on the whole thing as well, and see if the extra information that's filtered through the papers and stuff over the last week has shaped a more rounded understanding and impression of the Ottawa Aces. So the first one we got in was from Carsten. Do you want to take us through what Carsten had to say?
Yep, so Carsten says, another Eric Perez enterprise, which will be more promises around player development than reality. It'll be interesting to see if Toronto is an abnormality or if they can establish the sport on a broader base there. Will the RFL change their guidelines in respect to North American players in relation to quota spots is the big question. Expansion without strategy will be horrible.
Cav said, I'm a fan of expansion in principle. And I think it could be good for Toronto to have another Canadian team in the lower league. Hope it pans out for them.
And Tom Andrews says, a missed chance to be called the Ottawa Otters. The Otty Otties.
The Ottawa Stags was better than Aces, but there you go.
Yeah, well, what do we know? We're not marketeers. The Otty Otties will be fantastic, and you've got your mascot already decided. What's it going to be now? A massive playing card? That'll be a very fat playing card.
Play your cards right, I think it's the half-time.
That'd be amazing. As for my opinion on expansion, I'm neither for it or against it. I just think that they should target a North American league within 10 years. Yes.
Yeah, so I sort of gave my overview of, I'm pro-expansion, but I have my doubts around the financial backing and overall planning, and just basically Eric Perez in terms of the Ottawa franchise. So I sort of talked about that last week. What's your take on Ottawa, and I guess expanding it out a little bit? New York coming into the Challenge Cup next year. It looks to be nailed on, and entering the league the year after. I guess if Ottawa get promoted, because if they don't, you're going to have that problem of two North Atlantic teams in that League One division, if there is a League One division.
Yeah. there's a lot to unpick there.
Yeah.
Let's start from the beginning. I'm a little bit disappointed in terms of some of the early noises, the sense of player development, because from my perspective, when this was initially talked about, it was Ottawa's going to be different to Toronto in the sense that it's not going to have this get to Super League in 5-year type approach. It was going to be grassroots development, and that seems to have been rowed back on a little bit just in terms of the initial comments that have been made. So that's disappointing. I think we'd all like to see a strong semi-pro to professional North American league within some kind of time frame. But we all know that's probably, even 10 years is probably too short to even think about that, I would say.
It has to come under our branding and umbrella as well, I think. It have to be like Super League USA or some. Do you know what I mean? I think for it to, for these clubs that are coming into our structure to be involved in it, and for it to sort of prosper alongside our competition, I think it'd have to have. I think our competition would have to tie into it to make all this activity worthwhile for us. Otherwise, they'll just overtake us in time. We're not a big enough sport to defend. It's not like with the Premier League where we can sort of bat the MLS away. If they got money men behind it and had their own strong competition, that's a bigger threat to our sport than them being in our divisions. I promise you that, people who are scared of your team getting relegated.
If it was to establish itself on any kind of footing that was even similar to, as you say, to MLS or something like that, even if it was that kind of footing, as you say, it would dwarf it. Ultimately, I'm not against it, but I do have my concerns, probably much like yourself, about the broader enterprise. I also have my concerns about the New York one, because I think they're making some big noises very quickly, talking about bringing NRL teams for pre-season games and all that kind of stuff. It's all got a Denver Test match feeling about it slightly, and I'm a bit slightly concerned about over-promising and under-delivering. So
I think that's the thing with New York, isn't it? They've made these sort of statements, so they need to now back them up. Obviously, we'll forgive them for not hosting the Challenge Cup draw today.
Yeah, that's definitely not their fault.
I think that's fair to forgive them on that. Whether or not when they said that it was going to happen, they already knew that it wasn't, so it was a bit of a PR stunt, but what have you. But what I saw on their shirts, Al, was sponsors. What
that's
I saw
true.
in their plan was commercial partners. I didn't see that with the Aces.
That's true, because if you want to go buy a New York Rugby League hoodie, you can do that right now, which is, that's probably not. That's a good sign, I would say. If you can already put your money where your mouth is, that's a good thing.
I would love like us to be able to afford to have a North American franchise that isn't going to be in Super League in 3 to 5 years of its existence, that didn't spend to that amount because it actually wanted to bring through, like, more local talent, add to the player pool, like Ottawa sort of said they were going to do. But I don't think the other teams at that level can afford for that to be maintained. I don't think any. You'd have to be a very, very giving and benevolent investor to support that franchise and keep paying those costs for those clubs that haven't got a pot to piss in to keep coming over to your competition. So they have to aim for Super League. They have to follow the Toronto model with modifications where Toronto have gone wrong in maybe giving people too long a contract or not having a clause in that meant they had to renegotiate once they got to Super League or something of that sort. I don't know, to have managed their cap situation better than they have. Toronto admit they've made mistakes there, haven't they? They've accepted that. They've taken gambles on some contracts and things like that.
Yeah.
But they're going to have to follow that way. That's the problem, isn't it? Like Carsten says, expansion without a strategy, he says will be horrible. I'd say it is horrible. We had a strategy. We didn't have a strategy with Paris Saint-Germain.
No.
We did have a strategy with the Catalans Dragons.
Yeah.
They couldn't get relegated for 3 years. They were placed they were strategically placed somewhere where the sport was a stronghold, where there were players that added to our player pool, where there was potential for those players to get into a full-time environment and enhance their abilities. They did that with a good, with a good feeder in of foreign players. We had plans with London, didn't they? They were allowed to have more off-quota players. They had kind of a London weight into the cap and, things like that. There's been plans there, and it's okay, London hasn't been an unqualified success in any way, shape or form, but it's still there. It's still going strong. It still has a core, and it's still producing players into the player pool.
Definitely. It's definitely producing players.
Yeah, we need to understand how we can get those players that our good friend Nate talks about so enthusiastically on the Rugby League in America podcast that play in the USARL to actually be able to step up a notch and become semi-pro players that play against people who are hardwired into the sport in the north of England, and then from that make that next step up to be able to be fully professional players that have the full range of skills. And you can't just expect that to happen, like you say, within 3 to 5 years. It's not going to.
No, and it speaks to, like, as expansionists or from an expansionist mindset, I'd like all these individual places to have stronger and stronger domestic scenes.
Yeah.
And I was hating to mention another podcast, but they were talking to guys involved with the Netherlands Rugby League. Obviously, I have a passion for going to the Netherlands. I'm interested in it, and it's interesting the way that they are developing in terms of they're increasing their players. They're increasing their number of teams, but it's very small, and they accept that it's very small. They're starting to have internationals and this kind of thing. So I want all of these areas to develop. The problem we have is how you step up from, as you say, kind of a USARL type level to a semi-pro level. And that gulf at the moment is too big, and we haven't, as you've said, we haven't got a strategy. And it's not they're not easy questions to answer about how you make these guys who are enthusiastic and keen on the sport improve their skills, push them forward, get the infrastructure behind it. These things that we have over 100 years of kind of community experience behind. You can't implant that within, as you say, within 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So it needs to be a sensible gain. And
one thing I'm disappointed about is that we didn't get any feedback sent in on the forum about this from any of our Wolfpack followers and listeners and that stuff, because what I would say is the Wolfpack have got a fantastic fan base.
Yes.
If Ottawa can replicate the same sort of level of interest and enthusiasm and love and joy for the sport that the Wolfpack have managed to generate, then all the welcome for it. But my disappointment is that if Eric Perez really did care about rugby league in Canada, like to the way that he talks about it, why is he not